Stephanie, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the very important and critical work that you do in our minority communities. And second, as the CEO of the YWCA, it was my privilege to give you our highest honor, the Woman of Achievement Award.
Thank you.
And I also appreciate the banking partnership that we've had with your bank. It has been very important to our success. In your message, you indicated that there were several possible causes for the banking crisis that we have. Moving forward, what needs to happen to prevent it from happening again? You suggested insufficient regulatory oversight, but is it also, or could it be more regulation, fewer regulations, and if there's a change in the regulations, how might that impact your banks?
Good question. I think that there's plenty of blame to go around, as I indicated, and others would agree. Most of the bad stuff that happened was not with banks. It was with mortgage companies that were largely unregulated. So, and, you know, a lot of them are gone now. I mean, they crashed and burned, so, you know, that first wave is kind of gone. But I do think for the future, we need to pay attention to those types of companies and make sure that they are equally regulated and not allowed to take inordinate risk on loans by simply not having enough information about the borrower, or in some cases lying about the borrower's capacity to repay. In terms of it affecting our bank, you know, any more regulation is always something. Most bankers wouldn't raise their hand for that, let's just put it that way. But it will not affect our fundamental business because, as I mentioned, you know, we've stuck to pretty traditional structures. We definitely do tough underwriting. We'll continue to do that. So we weren't tempted in the past, and we won't be tempted in the future to go out on a limb with the type of lending that we're not comfortable with.
President McHenry, you have given me a signal pleasure today. I have known for years of the concept of the triple bottom line, and I've struggled a little bit to understand exactly what it embodies, but I see it, to borrow your phrasing too, as an enterprise that seeks to be financially profitable, but also a valued participant in its general community health, and also green, environmentally valuable. And it strikes me that you are the embodiment of that. You're the first time I've really seen somebody whose institution seems to live it, live the message. I congratulate you, and it's a real pleasure for me. But I ask you this question. Conceptually, is it not really still a single bottom line? It's not obviously purely a financial bottom line, but there must be a way that you, in practice, integrate those three objectives. And the concept of a broadly sustainable business which maximizes its sustainable bottom line, that really is how the three objectives reconcile themselves. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reasons that you can be successful at focusing on those things is your knowledge base in those areas is perhaps greater than someone else that wasn't focused on it. So we've been successful in communities because we live in those communities every day. I mean, that is our whole bank from Ron down. Everybody is focused on that as a core piece of our business. So more knowledge helps take what might be perceived as more risk and allows you to do that profitably. And you could say the same thing for the green industry. I mean, we've got, bank scientists, on staff that can advise our lenders on what makes sense, both from a sustainability and from a business perspective. So I think it's allocating the time and the resources to become knowledgeable enough about those niches that allows you to be profitable with it.
Stephanie, you addressed some of the issues with the bank, and I wanted to ask two questions that I think are related. One is the current economic forecast is that there'll be a lot of trouble in the commercial real estate market. And my question really is ShoreBank exposed in that market in any way that might cause you issues? I'm going to assume no, but you can answer that. The second issue is the President has suggested allocating money from the TARP for community banks to increase credit to small business borrowers. under the argument that they're closer to the customer and would provide more. Would ShoreBank be eligible for such funds if that program came about, and would you be likely to use them to expand your lending in Cleveland?
On the commercial real estate side, we're not overly exposed there. A lot of our loans are secured by real estate, but it's usually the owner of the business that's in that building. We do have some exposure on the multifamily housing side in the Chicago market that we're just going to have to work through, because unemployment in some of our neighborhoods is just beyond. I think someone said out of the 10 highest unemployment rates in the country, 7 of them are our neighborhoods. So, those are just tough times to work through. So I would bet we've got a few more bumps there. In terms of TARP, there was a more specific allocation for community development financial institutions that is aimed at folks like us who are really on the ground, not only in the communities in general, but in particularly challenged communities. And we certainly will be exploring our ability to tap into that. We love nothing better than doing loans. I mean, that's why we're here. There's absolutely no point to be sitting on 105th Street in that building unless we can get money out on the street to pursue our mission. So we will be pursuing aggressively every opportunity we have to increase our lending here.
Ms. McHenry, you mentioned earlier that one of the major causes for the bank crisis, the bank failures, was not with the bank themselves, but rather with mortgage companies. As we sit here today, there are major discussions going on in Washington as extending the various types of regulations that relate to your industry. Would you be in favor of specifically of having new legislation which provided clear-cut regulation for mortgage companies, for hedge funds, and for derivatives?
Yes, yes, and yes. Yeah, I mean, I think what they say, no crisis should go wasted. If we don't learn something from what we've just gone through, we can only blame ourselves when we end up here again in 20 years. So I think regulation is part of it. I'm not going to go down the list, but there are other things: personal behavior, responsibility, saving versus spending, all that stuff. So if it takes the regulation to rein it in for now, I think that's what should happen. Yes.
You talked earlier about avoiding a jobless recovery. That's a phrase I think is an oxymoron. You can't recover from a recession where you lost a bunch of jobs and not bring jobs back. But I'm curious about your opinion on whether or where the tipping point is. Where do we, in terms of jobs or in terms of lending or in terms of economic activity, in your own opinion, have we moved past the point of the possibility of a double-dip recession and kind of gotten over that hump where we're headed straight uphill again?
Wow, if I knew that, my pay grade would be way up here somewhere. From what we see in the neighborhoods where we work, I mean, there's not a whole lot of sign of moving up just yet. I talked to you about the unemployment and all the issues that creates. My personal opinion is that as a nation, until we can figure out what our next big trick is, what is our next big act? First it was agriculture, then it was manufacturing, then it was intellectual, but now that can be done elsewhere too. It seems to me that the only thing that we have going for us is making people buy stuff. I mean, you can't, that's not a sustainable economic model to just make sure everybody goes in enough debt to keep the economy going, So, until I can hear, certainly we can think about green industries, for example, where we're making some progress, and you can see sort of on a global scale where that could come into play in other areas that aren't thinking about it yet. So I think that there's big things that we need to do to try to figure out what our next, economic powerhouse is before I feel confident that we can get on a trajectory and stay in a positive direction.